just sitting with bated breath. They're ready to start. So good morning, everyone. My name is Tim Russell. I'm the CEO of the Intercollegiate Tennis Association, and the ITA is the governing body of college tennis. We actually serve 1,200 schools, 1,700 programs, 3,000 coaches, 1,500 officials, and 19,000 student athletes. And we're just delighted that you're here today. This event, College Tennis and the Recruiting Process, is a community engagement activity that's actually part of the 2019 Oracle ITA National Fall Championships. Just very briefly about what this tournament's about. It's the only tournament in all of intercollegiate athletics where a student from any one of the 5 divisions, D1, 2, 3, NAIA, or junior college, could actually win a national championship. We started on Wednesday with representatives from all of the divisions, and here we are on Championship Sunday. One of the things that the ITA has been trying to do is lead by example, and recently we hired a wonderful guy named Dave Mullins, who for 12 years was a college coach, including 9 University of Oklahoma, as our managing director of community engagement and coach empowerment. You like that phrase? Like coach empowerment. And we're basically a coaches association, and I'm really excited that we have 5 coaches here to join us today. They're going to introduce themselves a little bit, but I just want to at least recognize them by name. So I'm going to go, let's see, your left to right. Okay. Bruce Burke is the head coach at the University of Texas. Last year, Texas actually won, what was your first national championship?
Yes, sir.
And Bruce was in his first year as the coach, so it's quite an accomplishment. And he actually has a player, if you look here on the draw, Yuya Ito is actually in the finals today. So we might actually have Bruce go early in today's talk so he can go out and get ready. So Jason Cohen is from Caltech. We're thrilled he's here. Mike Morgan is from Pomona, or do you say Pomona?
Pomona Pitzer, sure.
Pitzer, that's what I was going to say. Christopher Tissot is at Glendale Community College, and Elizabeth Ferris is at UC Irvine. And then my co-moderator, somebody who's been following junior tennis and college tennis for a long time, Lisa Stone, many of you might know, with Parenting Aces. I've known Lisa for a really long time. We won't spend too much time on it, but in my early life, I worked a lot with the USTA and junior competition. She's been part of this journey, having children go through junior tennis up to playing college tennis. So we're really honored, Lisa, that you're here also. So here's what the format's going to be, just so you can get ready. In my early life, I was a college professor. I was never a college tennis player, was never a college tennis coach. I was actually an orchestra conductor. Now I'm trying to get 3,000 coaches to sing from the same playbook. And in my role as an orchestra conductor at Arizona State, I actually recruited orchestral students, and I once had 62 full tuition scholarships to give out. So I've thought a little bit about recruiting as well. How many of you also play the violin? No, that's a joke. Okay, because there you go, because you can also get a college scholarship there. So I'm going to start with just a few thoughts that maybe will set the tone. Then we're going to go down the row and ask all of these coaches to offer 2 or 3 minutes of their thoughts. Then we're going to start a little conversation. We want to make sure there's time for some questions from all of you. Does that sound like a plan? All right, fantastic. So first and foremost, thank you for being here, because being informed as part of the process is really important, because I think we can all agree that deciding where to go to college is probably the first big decision that a young person's going to make in their life. From my chair, ultimately college tennis is about higher education. You might think about possibly becoming a pro, and certainly it's a pathway to the pros, but ultimately college tennis is about higher education. And I will submit to you that there is a place for everyone someplace. A lot of people get really focused on one place, but there's a place for everyone. I just want to reference 2 books that you might be interested in. One is a great book, came out a couple years ago, by Frank Bruni. Frank Bruni is a columnist for the New York Times, and he's written a book called Where You Go Is Not Who You Will Be. Where you go is not who you will be. And his basic premise is that there's bunches of places out there. You just don't have Harvard or Texas or Caltech, that there's a lot of places out there. Another one's called A is for Admissions, which really talks about how to navigate the admissions process. So the first recommendation that I'm going to make, which is counterintuitive to some people, is you should choose a place you want to go to school where if on the first day of practice you got injured and you couldn't play anymore, where do you want to go to school? There's also people who start off saying they want to be college athletes and they decide a little bit into their college career they don't want to. I've had a niece who was a nationally ranked diver. She went to Notre Dame and she decided she was more interested in her religion major and stopped diving. So where do you want to go to school? Where do you think you'll belong? Where will you find a sense of community, the team culture, feeling connected with the coach and your colleagues? Just some kind of thoughts from my chair. One is, I think, and they can speak to this in terms of their priorities of what they're looking for, but aside from your talent and aside from your UTR, who actually loves playing tennis? Who loves to compete? What is your work ethic? Yeah, I've seen some hands going up. That's good. That's good stuff. I would also submit that some of you are going to want to know about scholarships, and some of these schools offer athletic scholarships. Others don't, but they offer financial aid, academic scholarships. So being a great student is as important as being a great tennis player. I'm looking around. Let's have some confirmation. How many of you are also great students, huh? Come on, don't be bashful. This is really important. You want to get into Caltech or Pomona or any of these schools, you got to be great students. I also will submit that there's different ways to tell your stories. And one of the things that I've watched is a lot of people think there's only one way to tell your story. So I'm going to not say too much more. I might chime in a little bit, but I do want to say that there's plenty of spots out there. I've done a study that the ITA is going to release. There's about 7,000 scholarships out there in some form or another. In the D1 men's game, what do we have, 4.5? The women's game, there's 8. D3, how many athletic scholarships? 0. But how many people might want to go to these schools? Lots of people. Can a bunch of these D3 schools beat up on the D1 schools? Yeah, first day of this tournament, a girl from CMS down the road beat a girl from Stanford in the first round. Stanford, unless you don't know, won last year's national championship. That's what makes this tournament really, really interesting. The final thing I'll say is really get involved with the process, both as students and as parents. And when it comes down to it at the end, trust your gut. That's what I'm going to say. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to start with Coach Burt. We're going to let him speak for a couple minutes, and then we're going to send him on his way, and then we'll move down the road. So, Bruce, thank you.
Sounds good. Well, thanks for having me. First thing I want to say is that I really think Tim made some excellent points about number one, about there being a spot for everyone out there, and I think I'm an example of that. I probably have a little bit more of a unique background than most of my peers in Division I coaching, because I played Division III tennis. I played for a small school called Haverford College in Philadelphia, and the experience I had at that school, both as a student and as a player, really had a big impact on me and my desire to want to stay in coaching, or to get into coaching and to stay involved in the sport, and in college tennis in particular. So I still remember back to those days and how I was influenced by my coach and how I was influenced by the whole experience. So there's, division, and to your other point about the excellent players that were in this tournament, our doubles team, who I think is one of the best teams in the country, played. It was a Division II team in the first round, and I mean, we were very, very fortunate to win that match. The level is extremely good all throughout the divisions, and I do think there's a place for everyone, and I think it's really important that you go to a school where you would be comfortable if you unfortunately got injured, staying at that school and getting the most out of your experience. So I think those were some terrific points. And there's all sorts of factors that go into making a good choice to where you want to attend school. But I'm a tennis coach, so the ones that I'm here to speak about are the tennis-related factors. And with that in mind, as Tim mentioned, in terms of the scholarships, Division I schools, most of them, the ones that are fully funded, have 4.5 scholarships to offer on the men's side. So most of the players that we have are on partial scholarships, and the range is quite large. We've got a few guys on our team that are on virtually no scholarship, all the way up to almost a full scholarship, and everything in between. So that's an important factor, to understand, to talk with your parents and understand what your family situation, what your needs are. Because it's really important for you to find a match between what you're looking for in the tennis experience, which could include the level of demand on your time. How much do you train off the court? How many hours a week are you expected to practice? What are the demands on your time, and really the demands of your effort? So where you might want to fit into the lineup, what kind of a team do you want to be part of? Do you want to simply be part of the very best team that you can be part of, and then run the risk that you might not make the lineup and might be in a more of a supportive role in the team? Or do you want to go somewhere where you can be, the big fish, where you can play high in the lineup? So understanding what you really want, and then kind of tempering that with a realistic understanding of what kind of scholarships might be available given your level, I think are the factors that really go into making a good decision about where you want to be. And if you do your research and you look at the UTRs of the lineups of the teams of the schools you're most interested in, and you kind of can see where you are now and see where you might be tracking, my best advice to you is that if you're tracking to be in the ballpark of a top 3 or 4 lineup player at that school, you can expect to be fairly heavily recruited and expect to have a pretty nice scholarship offer. But if you're tracking to be a lower lineup player, or perhaps a guy that's fighting to make the lineup, most likely your scholarship offer is going to be very small or not at all. Not to say there's not a spot for you on the team, and not to say that you can't make the lineup, because we have players on our team right now that I expect to have a very good shot to make our lineup who are on almost no scholarship. But that's where the match comes in. Knowing where you want to be and knowing realistically where you're tracking and what kind of scholarship offers might be available. And of course, when you're looking at state schools like Texas or any of the California schools, you could pretty much count on that school being twice as expensive if you're coming from out of state. So, that's a consideration, for you as a family to make. But those are the kind of things that I would say you need to consider when you're trying to find the best match between your level, what you want out of the program, what kind of a team you want to be part of, and then what your scholarship needs are.
So let me I'm going to try to piggyback on a couple comments. One, the Frank Bruni book addresses this whole idea of the big fish, and talk about how many great schools there are. To your point about your doubles team, a guy from Notre Dame who made the semifinals yesterday came within 2 points of losing to a guy from D2 also in the first round. So the parity is unbelievable. One of the other pieces of advice I would give is it's not just about getting your scholarship, it's about continuing to get better and better. So everybody's tracking their UTRs right now. You should be thinking about how good do you want to be when not only are you 18, but when you're 22. It's not just about up until the point you're getting a scholarship. It's all about a process about getting better every day.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I also think the level of expectation that you're going to have if you come to a school like Texas or one of the Power 5 schools is going to be pretty high. Those coaches are going to expect that you continue to play and work hard, not just during the academic year, but also in the summer. So if you're more interested in doing a lot of internships in the summer and really kind of taking the summer off and just kind of tuning up a couple of times a week, that's probably not going to be a match for you, and you're probably going to end up butting heads with the coaches. So that's what I mean about the level of expectation that's going to be placed on you, not just during the week and during your school year, but also during the summer.
We continue to find that when you think about this issue, you just need to kind of understand the place that you're going. recruiting's getting earlier and earlier, which is a topic we can all intersect, and especially on the women's side, we're going to ask Elizabeth. And I've seen a bunch of coaches give out the scholarships, and then people just stop really playing. And I've actually personally not been a fan of this early recruiting, and sometimes you can actually wait till the end when you're actually better and still get a slot. I think Lisa wants to jump in, then we're going to move over to Jason here.
I wanted to say something regarding scholarships. You're going to hear from the coaches. They're going to talk about athletic scholarships. You need to understand, as families, athletic scholarship money isn't the only scholarship money available to you as a family. And as Tim mentioned, the academic strength of your student athlete can really boost the amount of scholarship money and grants and loans and all sorts of other financial assistance that may be available. If you don't have the grades and the scores, that may go off the table, and then you are 100% relying on what tennis is going to bring in. So I want to just encourage you guys not to think only about what kind of tennis scholarship might be available to your child, but also what other opportunities are out there for helping you fund their college education. We understand, I mean, I'm a tennis parent, that's my role, and the amount of money we spent during my kids' junior tennis development would have paid for college 5 times. So I get it, and you kind of come into it with this expectation that if my kid gets good enough, their college education is going to be 100% paid for. Tennis, especially for the boys, isn't necessarily going to do that. So there have to be other ways to fund that education. And I know these guys are going to touch on that as well.
Part of this is this tapestry of putting it together. Not everybody can go to Duke. Not everybody can go to Texas. I keep coming back to there are a bunch of great universities out there. My son, for example, thought he wanted to go to a big school. He got recruited by Ohio State. He got recruited by Minnesota, Purdue, Penn State. He ended up going to the College of William and Mary. When the first letter came in, this was when people actually sent hard copy letters, not just emails. He said, where the hell's, oh, I can't say that. Where the heck is William and Mary? I said, it's one of the top universities in the country. It's actually called the Public Ivy. I said, you should actually respond to that, coach. He did. He still didn't think he wanted to go. He went to one of the most beautiful campuses. He met the team. He connected. He got this incredible education. He ended up going out to compete against Stanford, etc. But my point is, at one point he was ranked 11 in the country. He finished his career top 20 as a junior. He had no idea about William and Mary, and he thought he had in his mind, I'm going to a big state school. So my point is, you got to cast a wide net. There could be some place out there you don't even know. Could it be Caltech? Jason's up. All right.
Great segue.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Yeah.
So we can kind of transition because Mike and I are both in Division III, and we can kind of talk about the differences between Division III and Division I and scholarships and all that kind of stuff. So as we already alluded, we have no athletic scholarships at the Division III level. Different schools operate financial aid in a very different way. So Caltech does not provide academic scholarships either. We do meet 100% of demonstrated financial need. So if you need money to go to college, it's there for you. I think it's promoted in the same way, probably. Yeah. But there are a number of D3 schools who will offer academic merit money. Oh, okay. Yeah, no problem. But there are a number of D3 schools that can offer academic merit money. It's all about finding them and finding, like you said, the right fit. What are the needs of your family, your financial situation, and then what kind of school you want to go to. At the Division III level, the landscape has really changed a lot in the past maybe 10 years or so, because a lot of the schools at the D3 level are very strong academically. I can speak personally about Caltech. Caltech's a top 5 school in almost every ranking that you'll find. And the team has grown a lot in the past couple of years because there's a lot of recruits who are understanding they want to come to a place where they can get the best education they can. It's very hard to be a professional tennis player, so if you go to Division I with that mindset and that potential, it's a lot of work to get there and make that happen. So there is a strong correlation between high-level tennis players and high-level academics, and so I think that's really helped the Division III quality increase a lot in the past 10 years because you can come to a really strong academic school and then you can play a really high level of tennis because, as you mentioned, Division III player won here, so it's possible. You play really high level tennis, and there are a number of Division III opportunities for players at all levels as well. We talked about how many schools there are and how many teams that exist. There's a wide level for the top level of Division III all the way down to the bottom. So if you play tennis, there's a school in Division III that probably could use you and could want you somewhere. It's just a matter of, like you said, how far you're willing to look to go find it, to find that best fit. There's a lot of schools across the country.
Can you talk about the range of like SAT and GPA and UTR that you guys look for specifically?
Sure.
So same thing about speaking up. We're all going to use our coach voice. The question was, can you speak a little bit to the GPA, SAT, and UTR range that you might be looking for?
Yeah, so for Caltech specifically, the academic requirements are incredibly tough. I think our admit rate is somewhere around 6 or 7%. SAT, to really have a shot, I'm looking for something over 1,500. ACT, probably 34 or above, put you in the ballpark. And Caltech specifically also requires the SAT Math Level 2 and the SAT Science Subject Test, and most applicants score 800 on the SAT Math 2. In terms of...
You can stay, don't leave. There's some other places. 1,200 schools, 1,700 programs. But college tennis is about higher education. All right, keep going.
Yeah. So in terms of UTR, we are nationally ranked Division III team. Last year we finished the year at number 24. So our range on our team ranges, some are nowhere players like a 12.5 all the way down to guys who are at the bottom of our roster who are in the 10 range. So normally, kind of like as Bruce mentioned, we were talking about this earlier, but players who are sophomores or juniors trying to gauge where they are, where the UTR is going to be by the time they're in college, but then also where the UTR could possibly end up by the time they're a senior in college, because there's 4 years and there's a lot of chance to develop in college. So I've seen a lot of different players come in at different levels and have very different results at Division III, because there are a lot of factors that pull you in different directions, because it is a little bit more based around the academic experience, but we also want to be successful in tennis, and so it is a very tough thing to balance, both. And kind of like Bruce mentioned, Caltech is a school where a lot of students do internships or research over the summer. It makes it pretty difficult for them to have a lot of time to really train like full time over the summer, whereas we do a lot of our work during the season where the players are getting better. But so in terms of our UTR, anything probably above a 10 as a junior player is someone I'd be interested in, and then obviously going up level increases. But
so I said part of my role was going to connect this, and Bruce talked about UTR. I would encourage all people over the next week. UTR is coming out with a new chart about ranges, but I was talking to Billy Payne, who's the Princeton coach, another pretty good school. You've got people in the 12s. Billy at Princeton has people in the 12s, but there's also people in the 10s. If you looked at the William and Mary list, I've looked at this, there's some 11s. Top in college tennis might be a couple of 14s now, right? I don't know what Yuya's rated, but at some point in time, J.J. Wolf might have also been as high as a 15. But it's this idea of just getting better, loving the process. Let's move to Mike here.
What about this? I'm assuming you are talking about the boys team.
yes.
What about the girls team? The UTR range?
He's the women's coach.
Yeah, so
Also, UTR is going to come up with this chart this week, but that's a great question.
Right.
So, but he was talking men's coach, women. All right.
so one thing that I would recommend is going on the UTR site, and there's some big improvements coming out in UTR in the coming few months. But one thing you can do now is go on, and hopefully all of us coaches have gotten off our butts and updated our sites and our rosters, but you can go on and look. And I took over Pomona Pitzer, this is my third year, and when I got there we had anywhere from a 9.5 to a 5.4. It was unbelievable. So yeah, so I mean it was and since we've grown, but there can be a wide variety, you know, and it's just something to look for. But if you look on UTR and look up the page, you'll be able to see the range. One thing that I was going to add, I grew up in Southern Cal. I grew up in Ventura with Mike and Bob. That's how old I am. And I felt very fortunate to do that. But it's also one of those things, and I just realize, and I still see it all the time in Southern Cal, is you grow up and what's around you, and you hear everyone, I'm going to Pepperdine, I'm going to USD, I'm going to Stanford, I'm going to SC, wherever, and you get in this mindset of like, well, that's where I must go. I mean, I coach on the East Coast for 14 years, and the mindset was, I need to go to the best athletic school I can. I'm going to go to Harvard. I'm like, okay, but there's some really good athletic schools out west too. So wherever you go, that happens. And I think if I had to do it over again, I was fortunate enough to play at St. Mary's, who has the finalist here today.
Great story.
And, you know, but if I had to do it over again for my playing purposes, I wish I had looked at D3 schools. And so it's just something that I would recommend. Look, how many good schools are within an hour of here? Take a day, take an afternoon, go look at schools, talk to the coaches, see the campuses. I'm sure Jason and I can both attest to the amount of surprise that a lot of coaches get or kids get when they walk onto these campuses, how gorgeous they are, and that there's great opportunities. And sometimes it's even the amazement of how much financial aid you can get. I have kids paying anywhere from $2,000 to a lot more on my teams. You know, we actually are one of the rare schools in D3 that has international financial aid. So it just depends. And the only other thing I would add on the D3 world, which I will please know that this is a gross generalization, but I would generally say it generally comes down to the endowment the school has, which generally goes with history and high academic ranking, and how willing they are to put that endowment towards financial aid. So if you look at the academic ratings, a lot of times there's going to be more financial aid available for those schools that have that larger endowment. Now it is, again, I will say there's a gross generalization, but I've been in D3 now for, my God, I don't know, 17 years. And that's generally been the way it's worked. Now at our school, Pitzer is one of our other schools. That's a younger school. They don't have as much financial aid available. So, you know, there are a lot of options out there. But as far as looking, and I get that question a lot, and I'm sure Jason does as well. We both coached at Colby actually years ago, and we'd get that question a lot relative to some of the East Coast schools. So it's worth looking at, and I would just say take the day trips. At least take the day trips. Or if you're doing business in Austin, go see Bruce Burke. You know, go find different places to see.
So let me try to connect a couple other things as well. One, you kind of stopped when you were trying to talk about what colleges cost. There's some schools that are now up to about $75,000 a year to go to school. 75,000 times 4 makes, best I can tell, around $300,000. So there's also in-state schools as well. I'm going to connect a couple dots here. One, you talked about distance. Our daughter went to the Honors College at ASU. We live in Phoenix. Our son didn't want to be anywhere near Phoenix and ended up, if you don't know where William and Mary is, it's in Virginia. So it's a far trip. But this whole other idea about getting a great education, I'll use the ASU Barrett Honors College as an example. It's actually ranked 3rd in the country. It's ranked higher than Stanford. You think about ASU as a mega school, but you can get a small school education in an honors college. So I think building on what Mike's saying, you've got to be creative a little bit. Don't just assume that ASU is giant, so you can't get a small school education. And so the point Jason made, again, comparing to ASU, where I taught for 22 years, a lot of schools measure on their exclusivity about how few people they take. There are some presidents, including Michael Crow at ASU, whose new vision is how can we be inclusive? It's not how many people we actually exclude, how many can we include? One of the questions President Crow always asks people to stand up at commencement is, how many of you are the first person in your family to ever go to college? So a lot of schools have different philosophies. So I would encourage you to match your aspirations with the philosophies. But a lot of what I want you to take away from today, and you just heard it again, it's incumbent upon you to do a lot of homework. There are many more opportunities out there than you would think. All right, we're going to move to Christopher. You're on.
Well, the University of Texas coach, he brought a lot of great points.
Speak loudly.
Sorry. University of Texas coach, he brought up a lot of great points earlier with the UTR, and we kind of discussed this last year at a coaches convention. We were talking about getting more Americans in Division I, Division II. And I know when I go out and recruit a lot of kids sometimes, when I talk with them, and we get a large range. I mean, junior college is a very, very strong level. I mean, you get guys as low as 8s, as high as 13s. The top player last year was a guy, I believe it was 13.24. So very, very high range. One of our guys that played for us back in 2011, Alexander Sarkisian, went on to Pepperdine University, was an NCAA finalist in 14. Brad Gilbert is another guy that played, Larry Stefanski. So you get a large group of people that play a lot of different levels. I think once again, most of the kids I get that I try to recruit, they're very good students. I mean, in fact, one of my guys who played for Irvine this year actually played for me last year. He was a very good student, 1400s in the SATs. We don't get kids that are bad academically. Tennis kids in general are very smart kids. So usually they come to us either because they didn't get the offer they were hoping for, or they're looking to save a little bit of money. And that's one of the nice things about junior college, is because California now has the California Promise Grant, so pretty much tuition is covered. So we don't have athletic scholarships, but obviously your tuition is free, which is a big plus. I think that, once again, is that at the end of the day, and when I go and talk with a lot of kids, I think, we talked about this last year at our coaches conventions, we want to see more Americans, not just on the rosters at Division I, Division II, and Division III, and there's a lot of great options. I think a lot of times when I talk with kids, it's the mentality is Division I or nothing. And it's the worst mentality to have, because Division III, I coached at 1 year at Caltech. It's a great school. Division III is an incredibly good division. Division II is an incredibly good division. Some of the schools like Barry, for example, St. Leo, which is in Florida, all very good schools. And I think a lot of missed opportunities. And sometimes I've talked with kids that, they will apply for 30 Division I schools, and they're very good players. Not like they're bad players. Some of them are in the top 40 nationally. But they don't get the offers they're hoping for. They'll rush it, they'll push it, they'll go to these schools, and they'll just be on the roster. And as a coach, it's very frustrating, because I want to see them playing. I mean, kind of like we were talking about earlier, I know some parents spend tons of money with lessons, tons of money with tournaments and all this stuff. And I always put this question to them: was the goal just to get them on the roster? And obviously the goal is for them to be in the top 6. They want to be playing matches, they want to be playing competition. So kind of open your mind a little bit to the other divisions. It doesn't have to be Division I or nothing. And I think that's the big takeaway here. The UTR is a great system, because now what's great about it is that as a parent, as a junior, you can take a look at those players at that university. What range are they in? Where do I need to be? My number 1 last year, he was a kid, great competitor. He was not in that range. He was about 11.4. He was only looking to do 1 year. The big thing is, with a lot of kids that we get, is, are you an NCAA qualifier? So, did you take your SATs, all that kind of stuff. If you're an NCAA qualifier, then you can typically do 1 year at a junior college and then go on to a D3 like he did. He's going to do his next 3 years at UC Irvine. He was about 11.4. He finished with us about a 12.2. So, once again, I think that, think about those things, because at the end of the day, we talked about this last year, about, the more American involvement, because there's a lot of international players that make up Division I, Division II. So all things to kind of think about a little bit. And if you're not in that range, maybe take a step back. Maybe take Division II or Division III. All very great schools. And if your goal is Division I, then maybe a junior college, maybe I need to improve in my level a little bit to get to that range. And so, I mean, when you look at the past players, whether it be Brad Gilbert, for example, they all benefited from it immensely. And so we get a wide range. Once again, we get anywhere from as low as 8 in the UTR to as high as 13. Once again, is that obviously you gotta be a full-time student, obviously, and obviously making sure that you're taking academic classes, so you're not just taking, all taking real classes. And every year, I mean, the kids that we get, I mean, they're usually here because one, they didn't get the offer they were hoping for. They're looking to get obviously a better offer, or they're looking to save some money. Most of the time, it's both. And so, once again, all things to kind of consider. And so, it's not a bad option if things don't work out. And my thing I would push heavily is that if you're looking to play college tennis, keep your options open. Don't think that it's got to be this one way, because I've talked with some kids that are very good players, and I see them go to these schools and they're just on the roster, and I want to see them play. I mean, that's the goal. And so, for recruiting wise, I mean, what's unique about California is that compared to the other 49 states, California cannot recruit international kids. We do get some international kids that come our way, but we can't recruit internationals. We have contiguous districts that we can talk with parents in. What's nice is that we can now contact players throughout the entire state through electronic means, so phone calls, emails, things like that. But what's nice about California now is that, once again, tuition is free, and it's a great level. It's a very good level. I mean, Alex Sarkisian was one of the best players that's played junior college tennis in the last 30 years. I mean, obviously he benefited from it immensely. He's on the pro tour right now. He graduated from Pepperdine. So there's nowhere you can't go to. I think that's a big myth that's put out there. Sometimes I'll talk with juniors and their parents, and they'll think that there's limitations. And there's no limitation. I mean, for example, a lot of times we'll play D3s. Middlebury wants to play us this year. Middlebury is a very good school, academically as well as athletically. So, it's a lot of times we play these schools because they're looking to recruit from us. So, think about those options. Think about, like I said, and like I said, if something doesn't work out, keep those options available, and just don't think it has to be one way or the other. Because at the end of the day, this was our big talk last year at our coaches convention. How do we get more Americans in the top 6? And we talked about some of the numbers. They're very startling, And when I think sometimes I talk with parents and they look at the rosters, they see all these internationals, and they feel kind of left out. And like I said, I think the USTA as well as the ITA, and I've talked with other coaches too. They'll have a lot of answers for these questions as well. So,
I want to just throw out there too, with junior colleges, one of the really cool things that happens behind the scenes that we as parents aren't always privy to is the conversations that go on between the junior college coaches and the D1, D2, D3 coaches. So the kids can only go to junior colleges for 2 years, right? A maximum of 2 years. They've got to go somewhere after that 2-year period. They can go to junior college for 1 year and transfer, but the maximum they can go to junior college is 2 years and transfer. So coaches like Christopher are talking to coaches like all of these others up here constantly about their players and where they might fit once they're done with their time in junior college. If your child isn't sure where they want to be, going to junior college for 1 or 2 years, getting those core curriculum courses out of the way in an inexpensive environment is a really great option. And know that the junior college coach is going to have your kids back if your kid is putting in the work academically and on the tennis court to help them find a great fit for those last 2 years of school.
I'd also like to be a brief representative for Division II, because we've referenced that we don't have a D2 coach here today. Someone referenced Barry, and Barry's the guy I referenced who almost beat the Notre Dame guy. It was third set. But the quality of tennis is really high. But D2, and I didn't know this as somebody who spent my whole life in higher education, has a completely different kind of student-athlete experience philosophy, including a festival they do with their championships and some other stuff. One of the first presidents on the ITA board was a guy named Chuck Ambrose, who was a great D2 president and really taught me a lot about the D2. So I'm just sorry somebody from D2 can't represent that. I want to make 2 other quick points, and then Elizabeth has been so patient there, but our time, we're going great. We're on a good schedule. Two thoughts. One, people have referenced UTR a lot. Just a study that I did with my son about USTA rankings, we actually found that every student athlete who was ranked as low as 300 in the USTA rankings, and coaches don't look at those as much as UTR much, actually got a college scholarship if they chose that they wanted to play college tennis at a school. They might have gone to a D3 school or the like. So this idea that you have to be ranked top 30 in the country, well, you might have to be ranked top 30 to play at Texas or someplace, but this idea that not only there are a lot of schools, but there are a lot of people, to Christopher's point, looking for Americans on their roster. I have a very kind of sophisticated, nuanced view of international play, and I don't ever want international players to be demonized, because the reality is that there are not enough American juniors to fill all of the spots. I was not going to go down this path, but since we brought this up, I told you we have 19,000 student athletes in college tennis. Here's a quiz question. I'm going to let the coaches see if they can answer it too. USTA did a study. How many boys and girls 18 years old together played 20 tournaments or more 2 years ago? 20 tournaments. So that's less than 2 a month. I'm going to ask some of you how many tournaments you play in a month. How many American juniors, 18 years old, that means they're getting ready to go to college, play 20 tournaments or more? Take a guess. They don't want to embarrass themselves. Oh my God, is it 10,000? Come on, let's have some guesses. 242, that's men and women together. We have 19,000 spots. My son played 2 or 3 tournaments a month, not because we made him. He loved playing tennis. You got to be top 20 in the country because you love to play tennis. America only had 242 kids who played 20 tournaments a year. So let's not demonize international players. The fact that all of you are here means you're going to go play college tennis, and that's great. I also believe that tennis is a global sport, and college tennis actually is richer because of the international players. Do we still want to get a bunch of Americans on the teams? We sure do. I've told our coaches an existential threat to college tennis is if there's not enough Americans. But right now, we don't have enough Americans. This is like pure economics. This is supply and demand. All right, now we're going to go to demand. We have only had one woman on this platform, and it's time as a coach for her to speak. UC Irvine, Elizabeth.
So I'll obviously be representing UCI, but also try to talk a little bit about Division I women's tennis in general. First, from the UCI perspective, we're an excellent university, high academics, obviously high athletics as well. I would say first and foremost, I'm looking for an excellent student. SATs can kind of range, but I would say right now most of our team is pretty similar to who is not a student athlete. Just I would say I'm looking for a 1,300 plus SAT. GPAs as close to a 4.0 as possible. Most of our student athletes are engineering majors, bio-sci majors, business majors. And they have mostly A's, some B pluses. That's kind of what we're looking for. As far as UTRs, we have a huge range. We have a roster of about 12 to 14, whereas most D1s have maybe 7 to 9 or maybe 10. We have a pretty big roster, which means our UTR is a big range. But like some other coaches have said, and Tim has said, look at how you get a sense of if your UTR kind of matches up with UCI's or any school is look at the roster, see what their UTRs are. For example, on our roster, we have our sophomore class that has 6 people, and so their UTRs have a range of like a 9.5 down to maybe a 7.2. So if you're a player that has more of a 7.2 and you go, okay, maybe UCI has a spot for me. At the same time, we might, but if we already have a couple people with that lower UTR in that year, we'll probably be waiting for them to graduate to replace that UTR, if that makes sense. So when you have a team that has a huge range, I get tons of emails from people with UTRs from like 6 something all the way up to 10, and they say, well, you know, I'm a 7, and you know, you have some 7s on your roster. And I said, well, okay, yes, we do, but we won't probably be replacing those 7s until that group graduates. Every team is obviously trying to recruit the best players they can, the highest UTRs. At the same time, I've signed just recently a couple players that were UTRs were a little bit lower than some other people we were looking at, but they were really good students. They were really good people. They had good physiques. They were strong. You know, one's really tall. She's a lefty. We haven't had a lot of that. They have had no injuries. They haven't pulled out of any tournaments. They haven't retired from any tournaments. They played 2 or 3 tournaments a month. So that kind of put them a little bit higher up on my list. I'd say, you know, as far as personality, you know, that's also a huge thing. It only takes one person to kind of root for a whole team. You know, I'm not the only person that's interacting with that one player. We have our whole team. We have a staff of people. We have professors. So we're looking for people that are a little bit more go with the flow. Again, focused on school. They maybe played high school tennis, so they have an idea of what it's like to be on a team. They have an idea of what it's like to be working with different coaches, doing some off-court training, things like that. As far as, you know, tournaments go and what you're working on and your game style, you know, that ranges, but you got to be playing those tournaments. Even if you're not doing well, I mean, we've recruited plenty of people that maybe didn't have the greatest results, but they played a lot. It showed that they love tennis. They played their high school tennis.
No,
Oh, sorry.
I'm just fascinated because I'm writing some. I'm just taking notes for my next time we do this.
You know, looking for players that play a lot of tournaments, looking for players that are signing up for their own tournaments, looking for players that are doing their own schedules, things like that. They don't just have a parent doing everything for them all the time. Obviously, as a public university, that's really large. You kind of have to do a few things on your own, and there's going to be expectations that you come in as an adult. Obviously, you need help and mentorship and guidance and things like that, but we're looking for players that, again, they love tennis, they want to get better, they want to work with other people, they want to collaborate, which I think can be really hard to find in tennis because there's this solo focus on yourself and you don't have a lot of experience working with others and working with a multitude of coaches and things like that. But we're looking for that personality that wants to be around people and again wants to collaborate. We're looking for that player who plays a lot of tournaments. We're looking for the player who's not retiring, injury, or is just not showing up to their match because they're playing somebody that's a little bit too tough. As far as the recruiting process, I'm looking for players just to be honest. I'm a super honest person. I'm very forthright. I just kind of give it to you how it is. Looking for players that give me an honest representation of their game, what their style is, what they're working on. You know, if you look at our roster, we don't recruit, you know, maybe the level that a USC or UCLA does. So we're looking for players that are a little bit of a diamond in the rough. You know, they haven't mastered all their skills yet, and that's okay. But I just want to know kind of what your game is and what you're working on, maybe what you project yourself to be, some upcoming tournaments, things like that. What you're doing, obviously in school, I want the transcripts pretty much right away. I want to know maybe what math and sciences you're taking. You know, if you're sending me an email as a sophomore or junior, I want to know what your classes are as a junior and senior. And obviously then we have the UC component to that, which has its own, kind of its own animal, so to speak. So I kind of recommend looking into things at a young age in 7th or 8th grade, looking to see what those UC standards are, what those A through G standards are. If you're a player that's working out in an academy and you're doing school for an academy and you want to go to a UC, you have to make sure that it's, you know, UC accredited, which a lot of people have no idea. So they're sending me emails, you know, the end of their junior year, beginning of their senior year, and none of their classes are approved by UCs. And so they're just not a good candidate. It doesn't mean they're not really smart or whatever, it's just they don't have those A through G requirements. So as far as UCs go, there's a few other things you have to look into, but again, you gotta look into it when you're younger so you'll give yourself options. If you're not looking into it until you're in the 4th year of high school, then you might have just wiped out a whole option. As far as our big roster goes, you know, hopefully everyone we recruit wants to be part of the lineup, wants to get better. primary, maybe their second or third year they get in, and maybe others is their role to play number one, and you're expected to be a leader or this and that. So, I just think that you got to be realistic. You have to ask a lot of questions on your recruiting trip. For me, I try to have as many matches as I can where I can work in our entire roster. For example, if you look at our schedule, we will play a Cal State LA or a Caltech or a Chapman or Hope International, and that's so I can mix in a roster of 13 people and get them playing time. Because the fact of the matter is that if we have a strong top six, there can be injuries, and we have to pull from 7, 8, 9, or 10. So I need to try to get those players as many matches as they can, so they can get better, so they can eventually be part of the team more and more. But we're kind of one of the few Division I teams that does that. So if you are interested in a D1 team, but maybe your UTR isn't quite up there, ask, hey, can we get some fall matches, fall tournaments? Do you do dual matches where there's double headers and you can change the rosters around a bit? You kind of have to really be your own advocate and really get a sense of what that coach wants. And there's a lot of coaches out there that have to recruit for just roster fillers. It's kind of hard to say, but they will do that. So are you okay with that? Are you not okay with that? Ask a lot of questions. Be honest about your game. I don't need you to I don't want to say lie about your game, but maybe fib about your game or try to give me an exaggerated version of your game. I want to see matches, not just a 2-minute clip of hitting with someone who's maybe a lower level than you. I want to see matches of, if you're a UTR, I want to see a match with someone maybe in the same range or higher, certainly usually not lower, not just a 2-minute clip. Give me references of your coaches, things like that, your high school coach, but just be really honest about your game and what you're working on, and I want to see transcripts right away.
All right, now we're kind of coming into the home stretch because we want to be done in 5 minutes because we want you to come watch the tournament. You had all sorts of great stuff. I just want to piggyback on a couple quick thoughts, and then Lisa, we want to see if anybody has any questions, but probably if you want to visit with these folks after they've agreed to stick around. I just want to reiterate this high school tennis thing because that's come up a lot. Again, I mentioned my son who was a top 20 player, and he actually won 3 state championships as a high school kid in Arizona and would never trade that for the world. I mean, tennis is both an individual sport, but being on a team, I think, is important. You used a phrase about you want to know what kind of people they are. My concluding phrase, I've been waiting to use this one, character. Character. There are all sorts of stories, and maybe you have your own theories. I was at a recruiting workshop where people talked about if students came with their parents, they actually wanted to see how they interacted with their parents. One coach in the soccer world actually said he has a drill. When they show up, he's got his assistant coach and him and the parents, and when they go to the door, this was a men's soccer coach, if the young man didn't open the door for his mother, the coach said to the assistant, you can take him on a tour of the campus. If the young man opened the door for his mother, the head coach took him on the tour, meaning that if he hadn't opened the door for his mother, he wasn't even getting considered. He could spend the rest of his 2 days visiting. That might be one example, but how do people talk to their parents? I love when you said, do you sign up for your own tournaments, or is your mother carrying your bag?
Yeah.
We're talking about maturing as an adult. One of the things we talk about in college tennis is that we're working to help develop championship human beings on and off the court. We have coaches who like to say that I have boys who arrive on my campus and they leave as men. I have girls who arrive on my campus who leave as women. These people are becoming great championship human beings. So right before we wrap up, I think Lisa has a thought, including a brief sales pitch.
Okay, anybody
That's
say something?
secondary. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say something really fast. Elizabeth touched on this briefly. One thing as a coach that I love to see, and also on the converse side, like hate to see, play your consolation matches and tournaments. I had a kid who emailed me a couple months ago now, and then I looked through all of his results, and he probably had 10 or 12 like withdrawals in consolation matches, and I just said bluntly in my first email response to him, like, what's the deal? And he didn't really answer my question, and similar to who opens the door, I was like, all right, like, I'm not interested in this kid because I want people on my team who want to compete. And if you don't play consolation matches, you don't want to compete, because it doesn't matter what round it is. It's an opportunity to get out there on court and get better. And I get more fired up if I see a recruit who loses in the first round and then runs through and wins 4 or 5 matches to win the consolation draw, more so than I probably would a player who just wins their first round, loses their second round, and then they're done.
When you walked by today, you might have seen a bunch of the trophies out today. We're crowning the champions. We're also crowning the champions in the consolation round. 64 draws. Some of these players, a lot of you would have said, oh, I got a bad draw. Everybody's good here. They happen to have lost in the first round, and they have fought their way all the way through the rest of the tournament. And that's singles and doubles today. This idea of not only loving to compete, but loving the battle. I keep using my son as a reference. This is a guy who works in player development, travels with the Fed Cup team. He could come off a 3 or 4 hour match at the clay courts. You didn't know if he won or lost. He just loved to compete. Fight your way through the back draw. We have folks today who are going to proudly take home the trophies, and they won the consolation doubles today. That's an excellent point. Lisa.
Okay, one last thing I want to leave y'all with is the importance of your child driving the recruiting process. I know the temptation is there to send the emails out to the coaches, to make the list of schools for your kid, to hound your kid about sending the emails, putting the videos together, all of these things. I will tell you from personal experience, the lessons that your child learns from going through recruiting, just that process of having to initiate contact with these coaches, having to follow up with the coaches, be responsible, organize their email inbox. There are now apps out there to use to help them stay organized. Get those apps, but let your kid drive the process. It's their decision ultimately, and if they choose a program that doesn't end up working out for them for whatever reason, it's not the right fit academically, it's not the right fit tennis-wise, socially, if they've made the decision to choose that school, they own the consequences of that decision, and then it's up to them to make things better for themselves, whether that means finding a way to make the experience more positive or possibly transferring. And I also want to say transferring is not the end of the world, so don't freak out if that is part of your child's journey.
We are going to have to end because I want you to all look over your left shoulders. You can see two gentlemen are doing the intro for an ESPN broadcast. One of the goals of the ITA is to raise the profile of college tennis. One of the ways we've done that is to offer events of distinction, including at beautiful clubs. We want to thank the clubs, including on our other club where the men had played. We'd love to have you stay and watch the tournament. If you don't stay, it's going to be streamed live on ESPN3, but the broadcast on ESPNU will be rebroadcast. If you don't follow the ITA on Twitter, that's at ITA Tennis. If you don't follow at ITA CEO, I'm trying to grow my Twitter followers. I finally broke through 1,000. We're 1,028. Maybe we can hit 1,050. That's at ITA CEO. You can also go to at Parenting Aces. But as we're concluding, I'd like to have a large round of applause for our coaches. All right, good luck and best wishes to all of you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Oh, I mean, for me, I'd be interested anytime. Well, I think the majority of the students who are, applying and interested in Caltech have mostly all A's. Maybe you could do B's in there, but it's also not just the GPA, but it's what classes are you taking. Caltech really looks for students who take the hardest classes that their school offers and really maxes it out as much as possible. Right. So for D3, we don't have those the same regulations as D1. So we can't communicate via email, cell phone, like text, like anything. So yeah, we would send emails to individual coaches. They can respond. Yeah. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you so much for coming.
No problem.
So let me ask you a quick question. Let's see about balance. Having a college experience. You have to go to college. I've worked with pillow. I get
Yeah.
I work with pillow. Like, how's good?
So yeah, I speaking specifically to Caltech, there's a couple of things I think that are in our favor. One is the way like the academic calendar is set up for Caltech, and we do a lot of their homework is very regimented. So like they have a problem set due like every Thursday for this class, so it's easy to like break out their time management to like, all right, I know like it's not like you have 1 week where there's nothing.